Action.
Action! Hi, Frank. We talked about Plato, we talked about Socrates, we talked about how Socrates was more or less Plato's mentor and perhaps his scribe to some extent. A couple more things about these two gentlemen. We went into what provoked Socrates to become a philosophical person, and it was this oracle pronouncement from the Oracle of Delphi. There was one other movement afoot during the times that Plato and Socrates existed that really provoked them. And without this movement, it's quite possible there would have been no Plato and Socrates as we know them. They may not have written anything down or conducted and executed the philosophy that they did. And what was going on was the introduction of a new technology. Around 700 BC, give or take, in Syracuse, which is what is today Sicily, which was part of the Greek sphere of influence, a new technology had emerged. This technology was called rhetoric. Rhetoric then and today means, quite simply, the art of persuasion. The ability to use the spoken word, perhaps even the written word, to get in front of an audience and shift their mind, to adopt a different perspective. What troubled Socrates and Plato was rhetoric started to proliferate throughout the Mediterranean, and it was being sold, literally, as a new technology. Tutors would come and teach anybody who wanted to learn, who had the money to pay. And it was really becoming quite an art in the ability to shift minds without any solid reason, logic, or maybe even objectivity and neutrality to it. And we all know the difference between emotion on the one hand and reason. Well, what was troubling Plato and Socrates was rhetoric and the proliferating technology was starting to get out of control. They felt it was becoming very dangerous. And everyone from politicians to people on the street to writers or perhaps even statesmen were starting to, they felt, abuse this power. Rhetoric within a narrow lane can be responsible, it can be reasoned, but outside of that very narrow lane, it starts to become very dangerous, and we're leaving reason and we're getting into passion and we're appealing to people's emotions, and we're getting away from a very careful, methodical, cogent body of thought. So in response, Socrates and Plato began their exercises. They collected disciples and they walked around trying to bring a rigor to thinking. And as we discussed, Plato's inquiry, one of his many inquiries, was what is real? How do you know what is real? Even today, it can get very dangerous. So whether it's in Plato's day or today, we can use an example of this chain. And we can ask anybody, an 8th grader or a PhD, what is this? And most of them would tell you that they know what it is, that they know what the reality of this chain is. They would say that it's steel. And then a Socrates in a Socratic inquiry would ask, well, what is this steel made of? And they would say, well, molecules. And what are the molecules made of? Atoms. And what are the atoms made of? Protons, neutrons, electrons, croutons. And what are they made of? Subatomic particles. And on down the line until we get to perhaps quarks or the Higgs boson field. But then, whether you're an 8th grader or a PhD, something eerie and terrifying happens. Socrates will ask the same question. What are those made of? What are the fundamental particles that science has discovered made of? The Greeks thought of atoms as the fundamental particles in nature, and we've gone a little deeper. But the answer, whether you're a PhD or an 8th grader, is I don't know. So, through the Socratic perspective, it's quite possible that no one knows what this chain is fundamentally made of. Nor a flower, nor the moon, nor the flesh of our body. If you're a mystic, you might be grinning at me saying, you know what it's made of. There's a Japanese poet named Beisho who says, there's nothing you can gaze at that's not a flower. There's nothing you can see that's not the moon. But back to Socrates and Plato, they forcefully gave us a suggestion, if not a conclusion, that no one really knows what they're talking about. And when someone starts telling you the way it is, or what reality is, when someone says get real, or I can explain the world to you, we want to maybe catch our breath. Ganagona. Big thank you to my gorgeous, shining, sagacious, wise, sculpted, and beautiful wife, to our feline who already knows all this but just won't tell us. I'm leaving the cave.